In the heart of the rugged Wild West, where dust hung heavy in the air and every day tested the strength of men and women alike, there lived a woman named Clara, who carried more kindness in her heart than most townsfolk could fathom, and perhaps that was the very reason she was punished by those who believed kindness was weakness. Clara had lost her husband to fever 2 winters back, and with no children of her own, she poured her love into the orphans who wandered dusty roads and empty alleys, children abandoned by circumstance or tragedy, children left with no roof to sleep under and no hands to guide them. She gathered them one by one into her small wooden home on the edge of town, teaching them letters, feeding them bread she barely had enough of for herself, and stitching clothes from scraps. At first the townspeople looked upon her with a kind of distant admiration, but admiration turned quickly into judgment. For in those harsh times, survival was selfish, and many whispered that Clara was foolish to take on burdens that weren't hers. "She's filling her home with mouths to feed when she can barely feed herself," muttered the blacksmith, shaking his head. "She's spoiling those children, teaching them to rely on charity instead of grit," sneered the shopkeeper, whose coin purse was tied tighter than his conscience. When winter rolled in, the whispers grew louder, until the town council summoned Clara and told her she had no right to keep so many children under her roof, that she was upsetting the order, that the orphans should be sent to labor camps where they could earn their keep. Clara stood tall, her chin high though her voice trembled, and said, "They are children, not burdens, and I will not abandon them to cruelty." But for her defiance she was punished, fined, shamed publicly, and warned that if she continued, she would lose her home entirely. That night Clara sat by the fire with the children huddled close, tears burning in her eyes though she tried to hide them, and she whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, promises that no matter what the town said, she would fight for them. And that was the night a stranger knocked on her door, a cowboy with dust on his boots and the weight of long roads in his eyes. His name was James, though most called him Jeb, and he was a man who carried both loneliness and strength in equal measure. A man who had seen too much loss and had stopped hoping for something better, until he saw Clara standing in that doorway with a dozen children behind her skirts. He tipped his hat and asked for water, and as she poured him a tin cup his eyes softened at the sight of little faces peeking from behind her, eyes wide with curiosity, fear, and hope. Over supper, Jeb listened as Clara explained her plight, her punishment, the way the town had turned against her simply for choosing compassion. And though she tried to smile bravely, the firelight catching the steel in his gaze, and said words that changed everything. "Then let's raise them together." For a moment Clara thought she misheard, but the cowboy leaned closer, his voice steady as a promise. "These children need more than one pair of hands, more than one heart fighting for them. You don't have to do this alone. I've got 2 strong arms and no one waiting for me. Let me stand with you." The children's eyes lit up, and Clara's heart swelled with a hope she hadn't dared to feel in months. But when word spread that Jeb had joined her cause, the townsfolk grew restless, calling him a fool, warning him he'd be dragged down by her burdens. Yet the cowboy was not a man easily swayed by gossip. He worked the land with her, chopped wood, mended fences, taught the boys how to ride and the girls how to handle tools as well as needle and thread. And slowly, where there had been despair, the cabin filled with laughter, learning, and the kind of warmth no coin could buy. Still the council pressed harder, accusing Clara of corrupting the children, of turning them against the town's order, until finally a hearing was called, where her fate and the fate of the orphans would be decided. On that day Clara stood trembling but proud, Jeb at her side, and one by one the children she had saved stepped forward to speak, small voices filled with courage, telling how Clara had given them food, safety, and hope when no one else would. Then Jeb spoke, his words carrying like thunder across the hall. "In a land this harsh, where death rides faster than mercy, a woman who chooses to save children should be honored, not punished. You call them burdens, but I call them our future. And if this town has no place for compassion, then maybe it has no future worth saving." His voice silenced the room. And though the council grumbled, they saw the townsfolk shifting uneasily, guilt pricking their hearts, and one by one, neighbors who once gossiped began nodding, some even stepping forward to offer help. That night, Clara's cabin was no longer a place of shame but of community, and the children danced under the stars, their laughter carrying across the prairie. Clara looked at Jeb with tears shining in her eyes and whispered, "I thought I was alone." He squeezed her hand gently and said, "Not anymore." And from that day on, the woman once punished for her kindness and the cowboy who believed in her raised those orphans side by side, proving that even in the harshest deserts of the Wild West, love and courage could bloom like wildflowers after rain. And if you felt your heart stirred by their story, if you believe in kindness, courage, and stories that remind us of hope, then subscribe to this channel and join us for more unforgettable tales, because together, we can keep these stories alive.